Over the coming months, the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia will be moving towards completion of its fact-finding activities and initiating new efforts focused on seeking accountability for the Hun Sen government's extensive human rights, democracy, and rule of law violations, and developing strategies for how the Khmer and international communities can deal with the upcoming 2023 national elections, given the reality that Hun Sen's long-standing campaign of repression has predetermined the election results. The publication of an especially important new report by the United Nations on August 3, 2022, called The State of Press Freedom in Cambodia, makes crystal clear in powerful terms that are highly unusual for the United Nations that the extensive and increasingly serious violations of freedom of expression and press freedom rights by the Hun Sen government make free and fair elections impossible and require special attention and action in the context of the scheduled Cambodian national elections in 2023. The United Nations stressed this point a second time on August 26th with the statement issued by the UN Special Rapporteur for Cambodia, summarizing the findings of the initial in-country assessment visit. He confirmed that free and fair elections were impossible given the wide scope and long-standing nature of the major human rights abuses of the Hun Sen government. The Commission of Inquiry could not agree more with this United Nations assessment. Unless major improvements are made to reduce human rights and rule of law violations, the predetermined and tightly controlled results of the 2023 elections do not deserve to be accepted or recognized as valid by the international community. Indeed, those elections should not take place at all, unless the harsh and extensive restrictions on political participation that have been imposed are eliminated, and unless the main political opposition party is allowed to function in a meaningful and effective way, without their party being declared illegal, and without their leaders and members, and other critics of the government, being subjected to arrest and criminal prosecution on a mass trial basis. By way of background, let's begin with a brief review of the highlight takeaways of the Commission's fact-finding efforts provided by Commissioner Paul Hoffman.
What are the key points, the main takeaways that have emerged from the work of the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia over the past 18 months, and that you, the viewers and listeners of our hearings, and other interested members of the Khmer and international community should be most mindful of? First, the most important, is that the evidence that the Hun Sen government over the past 37 years has engaged in a long-standing, widespread, and systematic campaign of increasingly harsh repression against the Cambodian people is overwhelming. In the course of that campaign of repression, Hun Sen has violated numerous rule of law, human rights, and international standards with impunity. Second, and especially in recent months and years, the principal target of these highly repressive abuses has been the main political opposition party and other potential critics of the government. The mass criminal trials that currently are taking place, the court order declaring the principal political opposition party to be illegal, the closing down of independent media outlets, and the string of arrests, imprisonments, beatings, and assassinations aimed at criminalizing all forms of meaningful alternative voices and civil society activities are all designed to keep Hun Sen in power and to eliminate the availability and effectiveness of alternative voices. Third, these violations of international law have been carried out by the Hun Sen government with impunity. Fourth, there are growing signs that this widespread and long-standing pattern and practice of abuse, without effective responses from the Khmer and international communities, may be changing. This past year, there has been a series of hopeful indicators that meaningful and effective change is possible, that Hun Sen can and will be held accountable for his major violations of international law. They include, first, Theory Sen's dramatic and outspoken refusal to be another silent victim of abuse, when in her own words, delivered just hours before her arrest and imprisonment, on the trumped-up charge of treason in the mass criminal trials, she recorded testimony before the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia that spelled out in dramatic detail why the mass criminal trials violated numerous rule of law standards and did not deserve to be given credence and support by the international community. Her testimony showed all of us the model that we must take to challenge the legality of the Hun Sen's government's actions and to demand effective reform and change. Second, a French criminal court just months ago issued a criminal indictment against Hun Sen and some of his leading generals and found probable cause to believe that they were criminally responsible for carrying out the 1997 grenade attack in Freedom Park at a political rally of the main opposition party that killed 16 participants and injured over 100 more. They noted that Hun Sen enjoys what courts call head of state immunity from criminal prosecution while he remains in office. But this decision was nevertheless an important first step in holding the Hun Sen government responsible and accountable for its abuses. And third, members of the United Nations Human Rights Committee, on the last day of their March periodic compliance review session on Cambodia, took the highly unusual step of categorically rejecting Hun Sen's claims that his government was democratically elected, reflecting the will of the people to have a one-party state, and that the mass criminal trials and other arrests and criminal prosecutions of political opponents and critics should be considered valid and lawful because they are carried out through the courts and law enforcement system. The United Nations noted that the cloak of court action does not make lawful policies and actions that violate core rule of law and human rights standards. Number 5, the upcoming Cambodian national elections scheduled for mid-2023 will be a critical indicator of whether Cambodia will become either even further entrenched as an autocratic dictatorship and major human rights violator, or can move in a more positive direction towards the democracy and human rights standards that the Paris Peace Accords adopted for Cambodia 30 years ago. If the elections are held under the current framework, with the principal political opposition party ruled illegal and disbanded, and its leaders subjected to massive arrests and criminal prosecutions, then the results of those elections must be rejected by the international community and by all foreign governments. The alternative and more positive path begins with an end to the mass repression of the political opposition and other critics, and a movement in the direction of meaningful democratic reform. 6, an autocratic government that takes or retains power by eliminating all meaningful forms of political opposition, by closing down the independent media, and by criminalizing any form of free and independent expression and criticism of the government, does not deserve to be given recognition and support by foreign governments and the international community. Unless and until truly free and fair elections are held in Cambodia under international supervision, the results of the 2023 national elections must be dismissed as invalid and not given recognition as legitimate. 7, with regard to its future directions and work, the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia is in the process of completing its fact-finding mission, with its session in early 2023 focused on the national election process. Then we will be giving a new focus to our efforts. We will be focusing on accountability issues and approaches, building on the recent French criminal court decision, and moving towards drafting of a broader and more comprehensive criminal indictment along the lines of the French model, but dealing with a wider range of major criminal and human rights abuses. Finally, we recognize that the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia has only a limited ability to achieve the goal of obtaining meaningful accountability for the Hun Sen government. We cannot do everything that is needed by ourselves, but working with the French Criminal Court, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, and other important international forums and voices, we can and will move the accountability needle forward as the principal goal of our work in the coming months.
Given these findings and the extensive nature of the human rights and rule of law violations by the Hun Sen government, the Commission of Inquiry made the decision to give priority attention to the task of exploring and developing effective and meaningful ways of holding Hun Sen accountable for his long campaign of repression and abuse. Here is Commissioner Paul Hoffman announcing this major new accountability initiative.
Today, the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia announces an important shift in strategy and emphasis. Up until now, for the past 15 months or so, we have concentrated on a fact-finding mission, assembling the facts and documentary support that demonstrate very powerfully the Hun Sen government's 37-year campaign of harsh repression over the Cambodian people to eliminate any meaningful political opposition and civil society voices in order to remain in power. In the process, Hun Sen has violated numerous internationally recognized rule of law and human rights standards. The reality of these violations has now been well established. The mass criminal trials now in process epitomize the depths that Hun Sen has been willing to go to keep his government in power by any means necessary. It is now time for the Commission of Inquiry and the international community to move to a new phase of this struggle and to take on a new mandate, that is to hold the Hun Sen regime accountable for these crimes. Holding the regime responsible in a meaningful and effective way for its gross and long-standing violations of international law is crucial if Cambodia is to emerge from Hun Sen's crimes. The French criminal court case of a few months ago shows us the way and provides a model on how to make that happen. The French court decision found that there was probable cause for holding Hun Sen and his leading generals criminally responsible for the 1997 grenade attack against opposition political party rally in Freedom Park. That approach now needs to be extended and expanded to cover the much wider range of significant rule of law and human rights abuses by the Hun Sen government. Working together with other international forums and voices, the Commission of Inquiry will now be moving in that direction, working to hold Hun Sen and his government accountable for their crimes. That is the new accountability phase that the Commission of Inquiry enters into as of today.
In addition, inspired by the United Nations August 3rd report linking major human rights abuses and restrictions on freedom of expression and media rights in particular, and the impact of these violations on the upcoming 2023 national elections, the Commission also has decided to give priority attention to the national elections. Attention is also given to how the Khmer and the international communities should deal with the election and its predetermined results, given the tight control that the Hun Sen government has imposed on the electoral process, and on the ability of the Khmer people to make meaningful political choices. The Commission will convene a special session and hearing early in 2023 on these election-related issues. It also will be exploring a wide variety of strategies that the Khmer and international communities can follow, aimed at helping to produce a more meaningful and effective free and fair election process than presently is possible, given the harsh repressive restrictions and controls that have been imposed by the Hun Sen government, which is aimed at eliminating any meaningful form of political opposition.
As we move toward the Cambodian national election scheduled for mid-2023, it is important to give special attention to how the Hun Sen government's long-standing and systemic human rights, the rule of law violation affects the electoral process, and how the international community should approach the result of the 2023 elections. In early 2023, the Commissions of Inquiries will convene a special hearing on the Cambodian electoral process to assess whether sufficient and meaningful progress has been made so as to legitimize the 2023 national election and its result.
4 things to keep in mind. 1. It is time to hold the Hun Sen government accountable for their long-standing campaign of persecution and repression. 2. the French criminal court decision of December 2021, holding Hun Sen and his generals responsible for the 1997 grenade attacks, provides the starting point for our accountability efforts. 3. Accountability begins by ending the criminal prosecutions of critics of the government, human rights defenders, and leaders of the political opposition, freeing them from jail and ending other forms of repression used against civil society. And 4. It also means that the Khmer and international communities should not and must not recognize and accept the results of the upcoming national elections in 2023, unless meaningful and effective human rights and rule of law reforms are implemented to make the elections truly free and fair. Join with us in the coming months to help seek effective methods for obtaining accountability for the Hun Sen government's abuses and for securing more meaningful and effective electoral choices for the Khmer people.